Are there any potential starting centers out there for the Detroit Pistons to go after, specifically rim protecting centers, or have they missed out on all of them? We're going to talk about that in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Today, you'll hear more about FanDuel a little bit later. This is a very hectic and interesting time, I'd say, for the Detroit Pistons and in the Pistons fan base. There's a lot of stuff potentially going on. There's a lot of, especially today, the July 2nd, a lot of quiet waiting to see what's going on. It has had a lot of stuff going on today. So today we're going to talk about opening up. Have the Pistons missed out on all the potential starting centers? Any bigs in free agency? We'll talk about that. Are they going more offense over defense this offseason? We'll talk about that. Then also a sneaky potential target, potential risk reward target, Lonzo Ball. We'll talk about that later as well. But starting center. So heading to this free agency, I told you guys in the podcast what I had heard. One of the biggest complaints I had heard throughout the entire offseason. And I think Vincent Goodwill wrote about this. I think James said this on their podcast together a week ago, or maybe a week and a half ago. And there was another national NBA reporter that came out last week and spoke about the Pistons' desire to get a rim protecting big. I don't remember who exactly it was, but it's been talked about a lot. And I've told you guys for a few weeks now that all I've been hearing, or one of the main things I've been hearing, is how off-put the Pistons were by the defensive capabilities at their center position, especially the rim protection. So heading into free agency, that was towards the top of the list. And heading into the first day of free agency, the Pistons were rumored to be one of the teams trying to go after Isaiah Hartenstein, which would have been a great get. But as I sit here and record, it's 8 p.m. on July 2nd, I got to ask the question, have the Pistons struck out on every possible free agent big they could have potentially gotten to solve that issue? So let's go ahead and go through the potential bigs. So I'm going to go through every big that's signed. Doesn't mean every single one would have worked out for the Pistons. I'm going to go through every big that's signed so far. So you got Mo Bamba, who signed with the Clippers. You got Batazzi, who was the target, I think, who re-signed with Orlando. Andre Drummond, who I know was a potential target, signed with Philly. Not Luka Garza. I'm sorry. Isaiah Hartenstein, like I just mentioned, he didn't end up making it out of OKC. He visited with OKC. He was the big attraction at the big man position for the Detroit Pistons. They were definitely going to try to go after him if he made it out of OKC. But OKC didn't let him leave without contract, so he went to OKC. Mason Plumlee went with Phoenix. Jalen Smith, potential target, signed with the Bulls. Jonas Valanciunas signed with the Washington Wizards. Mo Wagner signed with the Orlando Magic. So those are all the bigs that are off the board in free agency. That's also including the fact that, Nick Claxton, another Pistons target that we all heard about for weeks, potentially months, re-signed with the Nets before free agency even started. So who remains? Well, no one really. There's no one left in free agency, that really, helps the Pistons in that regard. I will say this real quick before we move on to the next point I want to take this. If the Pistons do strike out like on all the bigs, which it looks like I think they have in free agency, but also like we're about to start talking about in the trade market, they should sign JaVale McGee as a third big. I think he would be a really good vet. If they end up striking on everybody, I think JaVale would be a really good vet for Jalen Duren. This is a guy who started out with defensive potential, wasn't good defensively. Obviously, we know about the Shaq and the full stuff. Kind of went up and down throughout the very early part of his career. Very highly thought of at first, high prospect, and then, started dealing with some stuff and eventually carved out a really good NBA career and became an impactful defender. So I'm not going to sit and act like I watched a lot of Kings basketball. I don't know how much he actually has left in the tank. I don't think much, but you're not bringing him in, for me at least, to play. You're bringing him in. If you strike out everybody, you just want a vet in the locker room. I've heard nothing but good things about him in the locker room, being a good guy, being a good vet. Players like him. So I would bring him in if you strike out everybody. I think he'd be a great vet for the locker room and really help Jalen Duren pick up stuff. But with that said, let's move on to the next point I was going to go with. I think they have missed out on everybody in free agency. Outside of a potential JaVale McGee being the third big, I don't really see anyone else. Maybe Thomas Bryant as a third big, but I don't think he really solves what they're trying to get, and he's come off some crazy injuries. I don't think so. So I don't think there's anyone left in free agency. So does that mean the Pistons have struck out on all the bigs? No, I don't think that's what it means. They have some options that they're going to look at in the trade market. Now, whether they can pull it off or whether maybe not pull it off is the best word. Whether they have that much interest, we know they have interest in acquiring a rim protecting big. We know that was something they wanted to address. In free agency, you just convert contracts to it. Do they have enough interest and enough want to in that department to sacrifice assets to go get one? That's the next question now, because I think they've missed out on all of them in free agency. Now it's about, okay, do you really want it that bad to where you'd go in and trade assets for some? That's the question that got to be asked. So some of the names I think that you should be watching out for that the Pistons could potentially maybe have some interest in. Mitchell Robinson from the Knicks. The Knicks are trying to clear some salary. I think he very much could be in play. This is a dream. This is like a pipe dream. I don't think this actually can happen. But I think Brook Lopez would be really nice get for him. I heard a little whispers through some reports, like at the beginning of the offseason, that maybe Brook Lopez, they move on from him so they can try to have a more versatile offensive or defensive scheme. So maybe they could get Brook Lopez. I think that's a little far-fetched, but they're throwing it out there. Next team that you could look at is potentially where is that? I just lost it. Where is that? Oh, Utah. Potentially, I've heard some whispers around maybe they want to move on from Walker Kessler. There's some bigs out there in the trade market that the Pistons could be trying to go after. Maybe they go after 1 year left of Clint Capella on $22 million expiring. He's not the player he once was, but I think he could provide something in that department for just a year. He's not great anymore in his role, but I think he still provides something, and he could be a good veteran for whoever you keep in the big man room. So Clint Capella could be another one. So there are, basically what I'm getting at is there are trade targets they could go after in the big man room. It's just a matter of how much do they really want to acquire a big man, because they missed out on them, I think, in free agency now. Now it's about, okay, are we moving on to the next need on this team? We're going on past that, or are we still going to continue to go after a big? It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough because their best options obviously were free agent targets. And I don't know how much I don't know if they want it that badly to where they give up assets. Maybe with New York, it could be more of just a salary dump. And maybe you could even get assets from New York because they are trying to shed salary with acquiring Mikal Bridges and having Julius Randle. Maybe they move on from Julius Randle. I don't think that's what's going to happen. It doesn't sound like it, but maybe that is the route they go. But I feel like the most likely one is moving off of Mitch Robinson's salary. That could be something. Like I mentioned earlier, potentially maybe Brook Lopez wants to move off. Clint Capella. Those are the options right now. Maybe a Walker Kessler, just maybe. If Utah's really trying to move off of guys, maybe that could be. I think Walker Kessler would be really nice. So we'll see what happens. It definitely is dried up. The center market has for sure dried up. And it's looking more and more likely as time passes on. Oh, also, this is the name that was slipping my mind earlier. I was wondering who I was forgetting someone. Robert Williams, 2-year contract, $12.4 million. He obviously has dealt with his injury concerns, but is he worth the risk at that contract to get from Portland? I think he could be potentially worth the risk there. It's not a large salary commitment to Robert Williams. I think he could potentially be worth the chance on that. Again, I don't think that's a guy you'd have to give up crazy assets for either because of his injury history. But Robert Williams is another guy I think potentially they could go after. So is the free agency market dried up in the big man position? Yes. That doesn't mean they can't get one if they want one in the trade market. And those are the names I think are available. If they have a secret move up their sleeve for a better version of a rim protecting center that maybe we don't even know is available, great. But I think those names are really the only names left in the trade market. So let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Are any of those names players that you'd like to see the Pistons go and get? Or at this point now, after 48 hours of free agency, would you rather just go into the NBA season now with Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart as your bigs? Remember, we've also heard trade rumors about potentially Isaiah Stewart moving on. So just let me know where you're feeling with all that. These are the names, though, that I think the Pistons have left. You got Robert Williams. You got Mitchell Robinson. Maybe a pipe dream of mine, Brook Lopez. Maybe a Walker Kessler. That's really it, I think. That's just really just about it. So let me know if there's anyone else you guys think of, and if any of those names, you guys have interest in any of them. Are the Detroit Pistons this offseason? Look, a few years ago, we saw them go offense over defense. This past year, at the beginning, it felt like they were going to try to go defense over offense, then reverted back to offense over defense. This offseason, are they again prioritizing offense over the defensive side of the floor? I love sports. I've played them my whole life. I've loved them my whole life. I love them so much that I never really want them to stop. But as the playoffs have winded down, we get fewer games, obviously, and the sports stop sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets at any time I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. I've told you guys this many times. A few years ago when betting became legal in Michigan, I didn't know anything about it, didn't know where to go. I tried out FanDuel. I have not turned back since. FanDuel is incredibly easy, super self-explanatory. That's the two best things I can say about FanDuel. But then obviously, it's incredibly fun and it keeps you on the app. So again, head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer and start getting those boosts or bonuses daily during the summer. That's what FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So we are only on day 2, at least as this recording. I'm recording this at 8 p.m. on July 2nd. So we're only really 48 hours into free agency. But a lot of guys have come off the board. And the Pistons have $26 million in cap space left. Now, last episode, I projected they would be around $24 million, but I also said potentially they could have it more in the back end than in the front end. And that seems like what Keith Smith is reporting, that it's going to be $26 million available for the Pistons still this year because Tobias is going to be getting paid more on the second year of his contract. So they are currently sitting at, if Keith Smith's projection is correct, at around $26.5 million. That's after using their cap space on Tobias, obviously. And then also Tim Hardaway Jr., who was on that $16 million contract in that trade with the Dallas Mavericks for Quinn Grimes. So they've already used, north of, or just about, just about or north of half their cap space. Yeah, just a little over half their cap space already. As of right now, they still have the second most cap space available versus Utah. Again, if Keith Smith of Spotrac's projections are correct, which they usually almost always are. Keith knows exactly what he's doing. Are the Pistons at this point showing that they are going to be choosing offense over defense this upcoming season? The reason why I asked that question is right now, if they don't make any other moves, and they are going to make some kind of move, and potentially it's a move we're going to talk about later in the podcast for a risk-reward type of player. But they're going to make another move. They have $26 million left that they have to get to the cap floor. Like there's something that they're going to do. But so far, if you just look at what the team looks like right now, it looks like that you would be starting a Tobias Harris and Jalen Duren front court. That would be quite concerning defensively, having that be your front court. Along with that, they moved on from Quentin Grimes, who had more defensive versatility, for a THJ. I know it was for the second-round picks, the 3 second-round picks that came with it. Okay, I get that. But he's going to be soaking up minutes, and that's another player. Along with Tobias is in complete zero on defense, I think, if he gives more effort, especially off-ball if he gives it more effort. On-ball, I think he's a little better. Off-ball, he has to give a little bit more effort to not be a negative defender, to at least be like a neutral one. But he's not like some great defender at all, and it's very possible that he could be a negative one this season. THJ is going to be a negative defender this season. Like, that's another guy. He is going to be a negative defender. So the 2 acquisitions that you have made thus far are for negative defenders. It's very possible that this next move that the Pistons make with their $26 million left of cap space is exactly what Trajan Langdon has been saying for the last, 2 weeks, which is a deal that is more so about getting future assets. Maybe they take on an unwanted contract of a player who isn't really that good so they can get future assets. Right now, everything's on the board. But if that's the route they go, I don't think they really have. And unless they make a trade, including some of the young guys, the roster that I look at right now does not have much defensive versatility. If this is the roster they run into the season with, I don't know how much. It seems like they are going to be prioritizing offense over defense. And again, we still got time to go to see what they do. But they have used over half their cap space. And the guys that that we brought up in the last episode that I think they potentially could be going after with the remaining of that in free agency, like a Buddy Hield or a Gary Trent Jr. or, Gary Harris just actually signed with the Orlando Magic, so they missed out on him. But maybe a Luke Kennard reunion, one of those type of guys. None of those guys are defenders either. Those are all offensive spacing guys. And if you go back to Trajan Langdon's introductory press conference, he talked about how important he thought spacing was for the main guys of this core. He talked about how they badly need it to decrease the turnover rate. He thinks Cade desperately needs some spacing. And they've acquired that so far with their first 2 moves. And I feel pretty confident right now that they are going to continue to try to address that. So if that's the route that they're going to go, they just don't have the defensive versatility right now. And the problem with that is everyone would rather, obviously, you get 3-and-D players who are able to space the floor and also defend. But the problem there is 2 things. One, everybody in the league wants that. Every team in the NBA wants to have 3-and-D players. That's number 1. And number 2, how many of those were available in free agency this offseason? Now, Gary Harris, that was a cheap option that potentially they could have gotten him, but he went back to Orlando. Don't know if he even really wanted to entertain leaving, but that was potentially one of them. There wasn't that many options available in this free agency class when it comes to a 3-and-D guard or a 3-and-D wing. There just wasn't that many. Like an OG Anunoby didn't even make it to free agency. Maybe I guess you could consider a Nicholas Batum that now at his age. I don't know how much he has left on the defensive end for real. He was fine last year, but he signed with the Clippers, and obviously I don't think he was really interested in going to a rebuilding team. So it's not like the Pistons really had a chance there. There just isn't, and that the fact that Nicholas Batum was the name I brought up as a potential target lets you know the quality of this free agency class. So I just don't know. I don't think the Pistons, as of right now, unless they make a crazy deal, they're going to be very good defensively this year. And I think the hope is with the hiring of JB Bickerstaff, who I've heard good things about defensively. If you're better offensively, now again, I want to make sure I am covering these bases and people are understanding what I'm saying. They still have time if they want to move some young assets to get more defenders or already now rim protecting center or already now 3-and-D wing. Like if that's something they want to do, they can technically still go do it. I'm just a little weary of whether they're actually wanting to do that, but they can. Who knows? Maybe they do in the next few weeks. It's very early in the free agency. But again, if this is the projection, it looks like that they're going. If this is where it looks like that they are heading. I think the argument that they probably will make is that with the hiring of JB Bickerstaff, who I've heard really good things about defensively, plus the ability to cut down on turnovers with added spacing, which means less transition and easy buckets for the opposing team, less fast breaks, less transition opportunities for them by cutting down turnovers, and making more shots, less long rebounds on missed threes. The Pistons were like middle of the league, I believe. Actually, we can pull it up right here. I was just looking at it the other day. I think the Pistons were 23rd in 3-point attempts per game this past year. And then I know they're 27th in 3-pointers made. So let me just confirm where they were in attempts. Oh, yeah, in attempts, they actually fell to 27th in the league. So 27th in the league in 3-point attempts, and also 26th in the league in percentage. So by making more threes, taking more threes, raising your offense, making the opposing team get the ball out the basket more, and less long rebounds by missing threes, which also lead to transition opportunities and easy buckets, that will in of itself help the defense. That defense in the half court, you'll have to just rely on scheme and communication. You won't necessarily have great defenders and good individual defenders, but by having a better offense, by eliminating a lot of the transition opportunities, by cutting down the turnovers, and having a defensive-minded coach in JB Bickerstaff, that the defense, if we just address the offense and provide spacing to really try to have a good offense, that will then in turn help the defense get better, even if we don't have quality defenders individually. I think would be the argument if this is the route they continue to go, which I think could be. It's looking like it. I think that would be the argument that they would make. And I won't necessarily push completely against that. I do completely agree that cutting down turnovers, providing spacing, having a better offense can help your defense. However, at a certain point, you do need to have good defenders. And I'm not killing them for this. This free agency class looked like the type, and again, unless they get in the trade market, where you were probably going to have to choose one of the two. And they do have defenders in Asar Thompson, in potentially, we'll see how he is as a rookie. I want everyone to remember real quick on Ron Holland, Asar, how good he was as a defender as a rookie is not common. That is not something that you should be expecting of every wing rookie that has defensive upside. That is not usual. That is special stuff that you saw from Asar. That's not common from rookie wings. It's just not. So just expecting Ron to be that immediately, that's not fair to him. And I don't expect him to be. Most of them are not good defensively as a rookie. They flash and let you see that they are going to be, but as a rookie, they're usually not net good defenders, net plus defenders. So I say that to say, I really think Asar is really the only one with Isaiah Stewart if Stu doesn't get traded, but they're not enough to, create a great defense themselves. And then, like I said last year in the offseason, can you create a defensive lineup that's functional on both ends of the floor? Right now, I'm not completely sure, but I can buy, if this is what they're going, I can buy that argument that with a better offense, that will then in turn help our defense, and we'll just rely on our coach's scheme and communication to really just be at least a passive defense. I can buy that. I do think that they should be trying to, I'm sure they are, obviously, but trying to get some defenders in the building, because you need, at a certain point, strategy and communication can only help so much when you have, let's just be honest, a lot of negative defenders on the team. That's when you don't have rim protection and Jalen Duren, unless he takes a massive step forward. When you got blow-by guys, not very good point of attack defenders in Jane Ivey, in a THJ, like that, playing heavy minutes, Tobias Harris playing heavy minutes, scheme can only help so much. So we'll see what happens. But I feel like it is looking like they're going more offense, prioritizing the spacing, which I get and I'm okay with. You're definitely, one, want to make sure that spacing actually ends up happening, like they actually end up improving as shooters, and these guys you brought in actually help. And two, JB Bickerstaff better have a great scheme, and you'll see. I guess we'll see what happens, but that's why I think the Pistons are heading right now. Unless again something happens in the trade market with some of the young guys. But let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter @Kukil. How do you guys feel about this? Do you guys also believe they're prioritizing right now through their offseason transactions that they are prioritizing offense over defense? Do you see a way for them to get some more defense into the building? Do you think they should trade some of the young pieces to go get some ready now defensive pieces? Let me know where you stand with all of this in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. With $26.5 million projected left in cap space, do they use it on some free agents, or do they potentially take a swing on an expiring high risk, high reward prospect, or not prospect, NBA player? I think they might. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So this is something that I've been seeing floated around the Pistons community, especially because there's been more talk about this individual player being ready when the season starts, feeling better, feeling good. And that is Lonzo Ball. Now, before we even talk about it, let me get this out of the way. He obviously has major injury concerns. He has just missed the last 2 years of his NBA career due to a knee issue that, it's going to be hard to really talk about all of it. But really, to summarize it, initially it was a little bit of an unknown. Took a while for them to identify what was wrong with the knee. And by the time they did that, had to have another surgery to then fix the knee, which kept him out for 2 years. But apparently is feeling really good and expected to, or at least he's expecting to be ready for the opening night of the NBA season. And they were projecting him to be ready this season as well. I don't know if the Bulls, what we had heard over the last few months, were expecting him to be ready the first night. They left that a little open. They didn't want to put a timetable on it. But Lonzo seems to be saying himself recently that he thinks that he'll be ready to start the season. So let's just start there. He is obviously a major injury concern with that. However, the Pistons have $26.5 million left in this offseason in cap space. Lonzo Ball is on a $21.3 million contract expiring. It's an expiring contract. The Pistons still have that room exception that we've talked about that they could use to sign a mid-level, a second tier, third tier free agent if they'd like. Lonzo fits right into that cap space. He fits right into it. And if you get Lonzo, if you were to trade for Lonzo, it sounds like the Bulls are trying to move off of him as they go more youth movement, as they get or want to give more of the young guys, especially at the guard position, more opportunity. They want to move off Lonzo. I think, now I saw some people saying that they thought you could get a first round from the Bulls for Lonzo. No, that's ridiculous. He's an expiring contract. Like, you're not getting a first round pick for him. It's not going to happen. Now, could you get a second for him? Yes, I do think so. I think you could get a second round pick for him. Could you maybe squeeze 2 second round picks for him? Maybe. I think so. Maybe. But I would argue, my argument would be simply getting a second round pick for Lonzo's contract and not giving up anything of value in return. Quite literally, the Pistons could do a deal where they are just absorbing him into the cap space and taking the second round pick for it. That qualifies for Trajan Langdon's take on a contract for future assets. That qualifies for that. It also qualifies as a potential legitimate upgrade on the roster. Now, if Lonzo is the player he was, again, he is a legit, serious upgrade for this team. He is quite literally, I think, the perfect fit next to Cade Cunningham if he's 100% healthy, if he plays. On the court, I think Lonzo fits perfectly. A catch-and shooter, tremendous in transition, tremendous transition playmaker, can run the offense. Not necessarily someone you want running your entire offense all the time because he doesn't have much rim pressure himself, but he can set the offense, set the table, and he's a tremendous off-ball shooter, off-ball player, and a tremendous versatile defender as well. So he is, I think, at that size as well, the perfect partner with Cade in the backcourt. That's if he plays. So you really are just, and again, let me make this clear as too. I think they would only go this route if they don't have anyone in free agency they really like instead, and there's no real trade in the trade market that they think provides more upside than this. If there's another trade in the trade market that they think provides more upside than taking the chance on Lonzo, then I don't think they would even consider this. However, I do think they will consider this if they strike out on free agents, they move on from the free agency, and they move into the trade market, and they don't see anything else really crazy. I definitely could see them taking the swing on Lonzo and getting a second-round pick for it. Now, I've talked about what happens if it works out. If it works out, you get a legit upgrade next to Cade, and Lonzo is a legitimate, really good player when he's healthy. Legitimate, very good player. If he's not healthy, if you make this trade for him and it doesn't work out, he's an expiring contract. You really have lost nothing. You haven't lost anything. If you're not trading anything of assets for him, you're not trading anything of value for him. You're just absorbing his contract for a second-round pick, taking that contract off their books for him. He's an expiring contract. If he can't play, if he gets hurt, he can't play again, you got other options to sub in for him. You got other guys that can play. And you can maybe flip him at the deadline because of his expiring contract. You maybe could attach a guy to his contract to match salaries. Or you could just wait to the end of the season and wipe his salary off the books and have more flexibility again and do something again next offseason. There's no real downside, I don't think, to going after Lonzo and taking that chance. So I know I said earlier a high risk, high reward. I think it's really a low risk, high reward, especially like you wouldn't do this deal if you're giving up anything of value. You're not giving up anything of value. You'd only do this to take on his contract and a second-round pick. If he's healthy, Lonzo's a really damn good player. Fits exactly what you want next to Cade. He worked with Fred Vincent on his jump shot. They have a relationship together. Obviously, Trajan was in New Orleans front office, and Lonzo was in New Orleans. So there potentially is a relationship there as well. So I think that is a sneaky potential move the Pistons could make. I don't know if it's number one on their list of moves they'd want to make, but I think it should be on their list of moves potentially to make. I think it has high upside. I really don't see the risk in doing it. It doesn't seem like you have any other free agents that you are really like crazy prioritizing. Now, Buddy Hield could happen. Gary Trent Jr. could happen. But if you decide you'd rather not hand out long-term contracts to those guys at the value they want, if you decide against that and you'd rather take a second-round pick just to take up the remaining cap space to help you get to the salary cap floor this year while keeping future flexibility, I don't know if there's a better chance to take than Lonzo's contract and him as a player out there in the trade market. I think that's probably the best one you could do. So again, there hasn't been really any like actual reports on the Pistons being interested in this. I just seen it. I brought it up like a week and a half ago on Twitter. I'm starting to see it more talked about by the Pistons community, so I decided to actually talk about it on the podcast. Look, I think it could be a low risk, high reward kind of thing. Don't think it's the number one thing they want to do, but I think it should be on the board. I really do think it should be on the board. But let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about that. Are you guys just completely out on Lonzo no matter what? Let me know what you guys think. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at KookHill. That's all I've got for you guys today. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Stay safe out there. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. I have an episode. What just happened to my camera? I don't know what just happened. Anyways, I have an episode scheduled next week with Locked On Cavs host to talk about JB Bickerstaff. So that will be dropped next week while I'm out of country. So that's something you guys can have something to look forward to. But until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace out.